If I were to ask you what is involved in living a moral life, I suspect most of you would answer keeping the moral law. We should do what is right, and doing what is right means keeping the 10 Commandments and the other parts of the moral law that Scripture lays down. One thing that might make us doubt this is to consider truly great human beings, the saints especially, but anyone we might come to regard as a moral hero. About such human beings, we don't say, she kept the moral law really well. He was really good at doing what he was supposed to. We say instead, she showed magnificent courage. He had extraordinary compassion. When we think about it, laws will only take us so far. They present us with a standard and say, if you fall below this standard, you're definitely not doing the right thing. But they don't present us except negatively with a picture of excellence. They're a minimum. But also, no matter how many laws we have, they will never cover every situation. Most moral laws aren't exceptionless, thinks St. Thomas, and even the ones that have no exceptions need applying. So take a law from the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not steal. We still need to know what counts as stealing, and that might not be as simple to work out as we might like. St. Thomas asks about the case where a starving man takes food from someone who has more than he needs, and argues that that clearly isn't stealing. I mean, it might be stealing from the legal point of view, the man might still have problems with the police, but it doesn't break the commandment not to steal, according to St. Thomas. Also, we all know that most of the time the hard thing in life isn't knowing what the right thing is to do. The hard thing is actually doing it. So St. Thomas thinks the largest part of living a good life will not involve simply knowing the moral law and trying to keep it, but in becoming the kind of person who lives well. Perhaps it will help to see the relationship between law and excellence in another field. The game of soccer has rules, but playing by the rules does not make you a good player. Indeed, I know the rules of soccer. I can play soccer by the rules, but don't ever pick me for your team if you want to win the game. I'm terrible at soccer. Playing soccer well involves so much more than playing by the rules. And indeed, when we look at the difference between truly great players and the bad players like me, we see something interesting. Great players aren't just playing the same game as me, but better. They can do things in the game which I not only can't do physically, but also wouldn't think of doing. The possibilities of the game are so much greater for them than for me. It's almost like they're playing a different and better game. St. Thomas thinks it's like that for us living the moral life. We should keep the moral law just as soccer players should play by the rules. But living life well requires skills, somewhat like the skills of a good soccer player. St. Thomas calls these skills virtues. St. Thomas thinks I need 4 categories of skill to live life well. Because he thinks that one of the biggest mistakes we all make is in being overwhelmed by our emotions and desires, he thinks we need 2 kinds of skills in dealing with those emotions and desires. One helps us not to be swamped by the immediate and usually pleasurable desires that might distract us. And so we need the virtue of temperance, of being able to moderate our desires, especially for food and sex. We also find ourselves in situations where we need to battle on in a tough situation that makes us tempted to give up. And so we need the virtue of fortitude. The toughest emotion we battle in this category is fear, and so the most important part of fortitude is courage, but that's not the whole virtue. Sticking at learning something hard involves avoiding becoming discouraged and giving up. That involves fortitude. Next, we need a class of virtues that help us take account of what is due to others in the situation. We need the virtue of justice. Everyone is called to act justly, but the person with the virtue sees what is owed to other people and pursues what is just easily and skillfully. And finally, we need a virtue I'm going to call good sense. We need to be able to think clearly about our moral decisions and make good ones. Good sense is something that involves taking wise advice, not rushing to judgment on what I should do, but also not being indecisive about my life. It's the virtue that crowns the other three, because without it, I lack the skill to see what the right thing to do in my situation is in the first place. Tomorrow, I want to extend this view of the virtues by thinking about the amazing gifts that God gives us, the gifts of faith, hope, and love, and which Aquinas calls theological virtues because he thinks they work at least a little bit like these skills that we have for living well.